We all look up to Helmut and Red Bull when it comes to the development of young drivers. There has been a clear benchmark in Formula One over the last decade. The Helmut Marko-led Red Bull program has delivered a conveyor belt of driving talent to the sport. With 4 world titles and 55 race victories, the headline results from years of investment. But whatever the sport, youth development is no guarantee of success, but yet it's that standout discovery of a Sebastian Vettel or a Max Verstappen that makes all the investment worthwhile. And it's a challenge taken up again over the last 2 years by Renault and their academy director Mia Schurisman. The success of the academy will depend on the success of the drivers on track, Schurisman told Sky Sports at the launch of the Renault Sport Academy's 2018 program when they confirmed the 7 young hopefuls on their books this year. We have a strict criteria, and looking at the level of drivers we have here, all of them finished in the top 2 in their various championships. The success for us has been having the drivers we have challenging for the titles, relaunched on the company's return to F1 ownership. The Renault Academy is now into its 3rd year. 7 young hopefuls aged between 16 and 22 have been signed for 2018, 3 drivers from France, 2 from Britain, 1 from Denmark and 1 from China. The oldest, 22-year-old British-Korean Jack Aitken, steps up to Formula 2 where he will teammate compatriot George Russell, a Mercedes protégé at former champions ART. At Series newcomers Carlin, there is McLaren's Lando Norris, while the Ferrari Academy is represented by Antonio Fuoco at Chirou's Racing System. It makes it the most anticipated F2/GP2 field in years, and one which the big F1 teams in their increasingly visible driver programs have plenty riding on. After all, F1's battleground extends far beyond the racetrack at 21 venues each year. During our announcement, I was checking and Red Bull announced their junior drivers just 3 hours before, said Schurisman, a former GP2 team chief and motorsport official in Malaysia. Obviously Helmut and Red Bull, McLaren and Mercedes. My colleagues are all around there keeping an eye on the programs. We all look up to Helmut and Red Bull. Renault say they weighed at the pros and cons of their rivals' schemes before committing to the blueprint for their own, but are also aware there are also useful lessons to be learned from their own F1 history. In the 2000s, the Renault driver development program provided the stepping stone for Robert Kubica, Heikki Kovalainen, Romain Grosjean and Pastor Maldonado to join the sport, and while Fernando Alonso wasn't part of the same setup, he was the poster boy for Renault's investment in youth and became F1's then youngest world champion with the team aged 24. 15 years ago it was only Renault, says Schurisman. There was no Red Bull, McLaren was just Lewis Hamilton. And so it was only Renault. Renault was the Red Bull. Now we restart back again and we look at what they have and what we can have. But at the end of the day it's up to our objective, and it also depends when is the availability of the F1 race driver. For the time being, there is no F1 seat available. Renault paired the 30-year-old Nico Hülkenberg and the 23-year-old Carlos Sainz in their 2018 lineup, with both drivers chasing the first podiums of their F1 careers. For a developing team set to target similar milestones in the new season, it's a sensible fit. But that doesn't mean there are not longer-term targets in place for what Schurisman terms a homegrown star. The target of the academy is to be able to bring one of those guys into Formula One by 2020, Renault boss Cyril confirmed to Sky Sports News. With plans afoot to follow Ferrari and Mercedes leads in placing promising youngsters at teams which take their engines Of course, there is one known inevitability. More youngsters will fail to make the grid than step up to F1 for all their success. Red Bull replace drivers on their junior program every year. Schumacher knows success and failure can be judged in a draconian way, but says Renault are focusing on a program tailored to the individual. Everyone has their own different philosophy and blueprint. We have our own, he said. We looked at the model of Ferrari, the model of Red Bull, the model of McLaren, and we also looked at where we were before. Everybody is assuming Renault is a corporate company and whatnot, but we try to be as personalized and bespoke and individual as we can. F1 2018 calendar and testing dates. The Formula One gossip column, and Schumacher believes there are lessons to be learned from further ahead than motorsport. With a recent trip to Southampton FC's renowned academy proving enlightening, we look at football a lot because it has a very wide academy, he explained. You have your under 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 groups every year, whereas for us in Formula One, because of the licensing issue, you can only start racing at 15 or 16 in single-seaters. So we can only look at that. We were at the Southampton Academy last month, one of the best ones in the country. We are working on a possible collaboration with them. It's quite interesting to see how the programming of selections in terms of the various Excel sheets they have in these things. It's not just training. See you tomorrow at Aspire Academy, Renault Sport Academy, Winter Training Camp. pic.twitter.com/cgfdme5tpf. The training is nonetheless the next stop for Renault's 2018 juniors, with the 7 drivers whisked off to Doha in Qatar for a pre-season training camp at the same Aspire Academy used at the start of the month by Bayern Munich. And while Renault is effectively France's national F1 team, the Academy's goal is to produce the best rather than necessarily the country's first F1 champion in a quarter of a century. The first priority is to have the best driver to win a world championship, but whether the best driver comes from Asia, Europe or South America, it does not matter, added Schumacher, as Red Bull have found. Delivering on investment in youth certainly matters, with Renault and Schumacher hoping the next decade delivers their own Vettel or Verstappen. Sky Sports F1 is the only place to watch every Formula One Grand Prix, qualifying and practice session live in 2018. Get Sky Sports F1.